We say that objects can experience a non-contact force if they're in a field. Gravitational fields and electric fields work almost identically. It's just that gravitational fields affect all objects and are always attractive, while electric fields only affect objects that have a charge, and they can be repulsive too. You already know that gravitational field strength G has the unit newtons per kilogram. It tells us how much force of gravity is pulling on each kilogram of mass an object has. On Earth, this is 9.81, but the higher you go, the weaker the field gets. This is shown if we draw field lines around the Earth. These show the direction of force, and you can see they diverge. The closer the field lines are, the stronger the field. This is a radial field. If field lines are parallel, however, the field strength is the same everywhere. We then call this a uniform field. If you draw the gravitational field lines in the room you're in now, they'll appear pretty much parallel. So we can say that on a small scale, gravitational fields are uniform. As electric fields can also repel objects, for consistency we say electric field lines always show the direction of force on a positive charge placed in the field. That means that around a positive sphere, say a Van de Graaff generator for example, the field lines point away from it as a positive charge would be repelled if you put it in the field produced by the positive sphere. If you put a negative charge in there, it would be attracted to the sphere. For a radial field, gravitational field strength is proportional to the mass creating the field and inversely proportional to the distance from its center squared. The constant we need to turn it into an equation we call the universal gravitational constant, big G. This is 6.67 times 10 to the minus 11. We give electric field strength the symbol capital E. Don't get it confused with energy. The constant here is 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0, epsilon 0 being the permittivity of free space, which you'll find on your formula sheet. However, calculating 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 gives us 8.99 times 10 to the 9, so we can just say that this constant altogether is 9 times 10 to the 9 as a shortcut. We can just call it K. It's very handy and you'll get the correct answer if you use this, and it saves a lot of time and hassle, so I'll be using it from here on out. We can draw the inverse square relationship for G and R on a graph, but for a planet, G, field strength, is at a maximum at the surface. If you dig downward towards the center of the Earth, G decreases linearly to 0 at the center. We can prove this actually. We know G is proportional to m over r squared. Density, however, is proportional to m over r cubed, as is equal to mass over volume. That means G is proportional to rho r. If rho is constant, which we're going to assume it is inside of a planet, G is just proportional to r, hence our linear relationship inside the planet. If you think about it, it makes sense because if you're at the center of the Earth, you'll be pulled in all directions equally, so there would be no overall field or force. This proportional relationship is also useful when comparing field strengths on the surface of planets with different sizes and densities. Field strength, much like force, is a vector. Quite often you'll be presented with two planets and you'll be asked to find out where there would be no overall force or field in between them. In that case we say G1 equals G2 for the two planets. Again, we're just looking at the magnitudes. That means big GM1 over R1 squared equals GM2 over R2 squared. You could also be given the overall distance D instead. In this case we replace R2 say with D minus R1 and then rearrange it to finish it off. As G has the units newtons per kilogram and electric field strength is newtons per coulomb, to find the actual force a field exerts on an object, we only need to multiply by the mass or charge that we're actually putting in the field. So F equals big GMM over R squared. You might say M1, M2 instead. You might use D as well. This is Newton's law of gravitation. For electric fields, F equals KQQ over R squared. This is Coulomb's law. Remember, r must be the distance between the center of the two objects. You could be asked to define these two laws using your words. We can just use the equation, just take out the actual SI units. You know that F equals mg for gravity, as it's the same thing as weight. But it's also F equals ma as well, isn't it? Because we know that gravitational field strength is also the same as acceleration due to gravity. For electric fields, F equals eq. This is a very simple equation that's always used, but it's one people often forget. You know that work done is equal to force times distance, that's Fr in this case. Therefore, if an object is pulled away from an object that's attracting it, like a rocket putting a satellite in orbit, then it must have gained potential energy. This means GPE is equal to GMM over R, and electric potential energy KQQ over R. Now you might say, oh, but I thought GPE was equal to mgh. Well, that's only if the field strength stays the same. If you're in a uniform gravitational field. Like we said, on a small scale, we can say that's true, but not when we're looking at the big picture. Much like we've seen newtons and newtons per kilogram, we have joules, so now we need joules per kilogram as well. This is called potential, symbol V. The definition is this: the work required to move unit mass from infinity to that point. The reason we use infinity as our baseline is because that's the only thing that's common to every object in the universe. So we say that's where you have a potential of 0. As an object gets closer to a planet, the potential gets more negative. Potential is a scalar, so it's the same in all directions. That means we can draw equipotentials around a planet, dotted lines that show certain potentials, much like contours on a map. No work is required to move an object along an equipotential. That's why satellites will orbit a planet without any help. Electric potential is measured in joules per coulomb instead, of course, and we just replace unit mass with unit positive charge. For gravitational potential, V equals minus gm over r. Electric potential, V equals just kq over r. No minus is needed, because if we have an attractive field, as if it were like a planet, well, we know that it must be a negative charge creating this field, because it has to be attractive to a positive charge. Of course, if it's a positive charge creating a field instead, you'll end up with positive potentials. Gravitational potential can only ever be 0 at infinity, whereas electric potential can be 0 between oppositely charged objects. As it's a scalar, you just sum the individual potentials at a point to find the overall potential there. Just remember that between two like charges, field strength can be 0, but potential will not be. Speed is proportional to m over r, and density is proportional to m over r cubed. V is proportional to rho r squared. If you have a graph of V against R, there are two things we can do with it. We can read off 2 points, calculate the change in potential in joules per kilogram or joules per coulomb, then multiply by the mass or charge of the object we're actually moving to find the energy or work done. So that means change in potential energy is equal to m delta V or q delta V. It might be tempted to put the distance moved as r in our equation, but remember r is always the distance from the center of the mass or charge that's producing the field. That means if we want to calculate change in potential, instead of using a graph, we must do kq over r1 minus kq over r2. Of course, you can then factorize this. However, if you find the gradient of a potential distance graph with a tangent, this is equal to the field strength at that point. That's because going full circle with our equations, you can see that V over R gives us the equations for field strength. That's why the alternative name for field strength is potential gradient. We can also find it by just doing delta V over delta R if we've been given two potentials and the distance between them. It's not super accurate though. We know from circular motion that centripetal force is equal to mv squared over r. For a satellite, this is due to gravity, and so thus gmm over r squared. We can equate these, the little m's and an r cancel, and we find the speed of a satellite is equal to root gm over r. If you're dealing with time period instead of speed though, gmm over r squared is equal to m omega squared r instead. And we can replace omega with 2 pi over t, where t is the time period. We can flip this and see that t squared is proportional to r cubed. This is Kepler's law, or Kepler's third law to be precise. It means if the satellite gets closer to the planet, its time period decreases. If you're asked to find out how t or r specifically change, you merely divide one power by the one on the other. Also, you should know that the speed increases as v equals root gm over r, and therefore its kinetic energy increases too. A satellite in a geosynchronous or geostationary orbit has a time period that's the same as that of the Earth's rotation, 24 hours. Quite often you'll have to put this into an equation, but it must be in seconds, so multiply by 3,600. The only place it can stay above the same point on the Earth is at the equator. That means there's a ring of satellites at the same height above the equator. These are used for communication, GPS, television, and internet. A low polar orbit is one which is lower, and according to Kepler's law, it must have a shorter time period. They don't stay above the same point as they move from pole to pole, sweeping out different parts of the Earth as it rotates underneath. These are used for surveillance and weather tracking. Just be careful, if you're given the height of a satellite's orbit above the surface, you need to add on the radius of the planet to get the proper R. You can sometimes be asked the question, how fast would the Earth need to spin for you to appear weightless? In that case, you've just turned into a satellite, and your R is the same as the Earth's radius. All we do is use m omega squared r again. We just do exactly the same thing as we've done before. If you want to escape a gravitational field, you must be given enough kinetic energy at the surface to be equal to the potential energy needed to get to infinity. That means half mv squared equals gmm over r, where v is the escape velocity, the velocity you need to fire something at from the surface, and r is the planet's radius. The little m's cancel, and we get v equals root 2gm over r. So that goes to show it doesn't matter how heavy or light objects are, they all must have the same escape velocity to escape the gravitational field. Distance of closest approach is the same idea but in reverse for an electric field. If you have a positively charged particle moving toward another, it will be repelled. If moving directly toward it, the minimum distance it gets to before turning around and coming back the same way it came is called the distance of closest approach. At this point it has a speed of 0. Kind of like when you throw a ball up in the air and it reaches the apex. So again, Ke equals Pe. So half mv squared equals kqq over r, where r is our distance of closest approach. You make a uniform electric field if you have two charged parallel plates. The field lines are parallel and go from the positive plate to the negative plate. Again, the field strength is the same everywhere. If you put an electron in here, for example, it will accelerate toward the positive plate with a constant acceleration because the field strength is constant. For any field, equipotentials cross the field lines at 90 degrees. So that means here they run perpendicular to the field lines. As these equipotentials are equally spaced, that again shows that the field strength is the same everywhere. We know that electric potential is measured in joules per coulomb, energy divided by charge. That means that if we take delta V over delta R and just replace them with the voltage PD between the two plates and the separation of the two plates for R, we find that the electric field strength is just equal to V over D, the voltage divided by separation of the plates. If a charged particle enters the field at a right angle, its trajectory is parabolic, and then it's just identical to a normal projectile motion question. You use suvat for one component of its velocity, and your speed equals distance over time for the other component, as that doesn't change. So A equals EQ over M, or VQ over MD. If our parallel plates are making an object levitate, like in Millikan's oil drop experiment, we can say the force due to gravity and the force due to the electric field are equal and opposite, so mg equals EQ. So I hope you found that helpful. Leave a like and a comment if you did, and don't forget to check out our revision app to help you test your knowledge, and I'll see you next time.